Hey, Ralph.
Hey, Jim, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. I seem to have a frog in my throat, but except for that, doing well. Hey, we're going to have a special series, Ralph, and I'm excited about it.
What series is that, Jim?
Well, it's one we've talked about for a while, and it's kind of designed for university students who are about ready to graduate. Now, remember, with Psychology Takeaway, we focus on the content of psychology, which is how you think, cognition, how you behave, behavior, and how you feel, emotion.
Okay.
Okay, now this has got something that is really highly tied to all of that, and that is money.
Okay. Well, I know how I behave with money. I spend it.
Yeah, and when you have no money left, what do you do?
I don't spend it.
Well, some people, when they have no money left, they spend it anyway. Called credit.
Yeah, sounds like maybe the government.
Oh, no. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But we have a special guest here, and I still think I'm sounding froggy. I'm not sure. But I don't know if you remember, Ralph, about 2 nights ago, we were sitting around at my place on the couch, and Mason Ludlow is with us.
I remember that, and we had a very interesting conversation about success after graduation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have counselors and maybe even a 1-hour non-credit course that they take at the beginning of their university career about success in college.
Sure,
but,
study hard, don't party too much on the weekends, etc.
etc., etc. And very few people ever talk to students today about success after college other than go out, get a great job, make lots of money, and now don't worry.
Hey, sounds great to me. Did that ever happen to you?
No.
That didn't happen to me either. Well, so Mason is here in our palatial studio today, and his name is Mason, as in Mason Dixon line.
Okay.
And Lee as in General Lee, and Ludlow as in his father. But we also refer to him as Duff, after the legendary coach of the Michigan State Spartans, Duffy Daugherty.
Okay.
So we'll refer to you either as Mason or Duff.
Okay, fine.
And Duff, after that introduction, you just want to leave this room and go away?
No, not at all.
Okay, well, Ralph and I can be a little crazy sometimes, but you had made some really good points the other day.
And one of the things, Duff, that I was interested in when you talked to us at home about the things that you found necessary to talk to students about because they had never really thought about these things. So help us out with some of that.
Sure. Mostly I deal with students who are just graduating or have graduated in the last year or two. And my whole questioning process and my whole philosophy is that you have to live in the real world. And the real world is different than we learn in college or in school, period. And we're often not told, and I would hope we were told by our parents, but I find that that's not true. And that's a financial world. The realities of the financial world are much different than they have been in the college world.
Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit. Some kids in the college world are working to make sure that they can pay their tuition, but a lot of them are still being supported by parents, and so things like room and board, tuition, books, car, food, is something that they're getting. And then, how about you, Ralph? When you graduated from university, was it a shock to you when you finally found out that you had to pay for all this stuff yourself?
It was a shock, and I was a little more prepared for it than some students were because I had worked the last couple of years in college to help put myself through. But what really shocked me was the salary point that I would start my teaching job at.
Yeah, what, $40,000-$50,000 a year?
Try 4, 5.
For $500,000.
Yeah, but $4,000-$5,000.
Aha, okay. So, this sounds like we're going to talk about finance, and we are, but only from the point of view of cognition, what we know about it, emotion, how we handle money, and behavior, what we do. So we're keeping it within the purview of psychology. So this isn't Finance 101 right now. This is Psych Takeaway. Okay, so Duff, the real world then is not based on money, but it certainly has some impact. And these are the students that you're talking to, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And the one thing I want to go back to something you said earlier. Yes, parents helped. Some scholarships helped. But I find that a tremendous amount of students are leaving college owing for a house. And they start out from that far back than most people used to start. And they don't understand why, and they don't understand the impact of that on the rest of their life.
Yeah, when I graduated, I started university or started work, and I had basically no student loan. And so out of the $4,700 that I started as a teacher, I could rent a reasonably nice apartment. But if I had owed $100,000, the way lots of students do today, my cognition would have been very impaired with how do I get out of this enormous debt?
I think I mean that's exactly the way I find an awful lot of students that are coming out of colleges and universities with this debt. So the first thing I do is I step back and I say, okay, what did you use this debt for? And I find that because of the government loaning that's going on, they don't borrow just their tuition. They don't borrow necessarily just their tuition and books. They borrow more.
Okay.
So for 4 years or 5 years, they're borrowing more than they are taking in. Consequently, when they walk out of college or university, they owe for those 4 or 5 years. And many of them owe for their living. Some of their loan money was used for eating. Some of their loan money may have been used for clothing. It was used for the university, for tuition. Some of it was used for books. And the books and tuition, I don't worry. That's debt. That was an investment they're making, and they're going to pay interest on it.
Right.
The other three things concern me a great deal.
Yeah. Now, let's, for our listeners, let's put student debt into perspective. Because, we hear about massive student debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but that really isn't the case. For an American college student, it's about $38,000, and for a Canadian student, it's about $28,000. So it's not like we're talking about great, huge sums of money, but at the beginning of your career, it's going to seem kind of like it.
Yeah, and the $100,000 debt is usually for students who go on to graduate school.
Yeah. Going into med school, apparently. Is,
Well,
check that out, too.
I would tell you all of them going into graduate school are many of them are going into debt.
Yeah.
to do that. And they're believing that's an investment in their future. But they don't realize what it costs.
You have 2.5 times the cost for each hour you spend in class. Well, the universities say we have to do that because you're going to be doing research and you're going to be much more independent and. Well, a lot of that basically shakes out as you're going to be an underpaid assistant for somebody who's doing the research. So, I mean, I can't argue against it in the sense that I don't know that it's absolutely necessary, but I can argue against it in the sense that it really increases the debt load that students come out with.
Okay, now the question is, how much? So we've said it's about $38,000 for an undergraduate. Okay,
Paying what interest?
Google is wonderful. We can get information immediately. So I left this computer where we're recording and went to another computer. You guys are exactly right. It's about $78,000 for a master's degree, and get this, $159,000 for a PhD.
Okay.
Okay.
So, you and I come out with new PhDs, brand new PhDs, and we go and get a job at a university as a first-time tenure track assistant professor.
Mm-hmm.
How much are we going to make?
Well, I started at $12,500 here at Central Michigan University.
What year?
1971.
Okay, it's a different world.
Right.
For
So I
these kids.
think that maybe I really don't know. Well, you guys hash that one out. Google and I will work on that one.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say that a starting prof in today's world will probably be making $60,000 a year.
Okay.
So if you come out with $159,000 worth of debt,
What's your ROI?
what should we be paying to service $150,000? Duffy, what?
Well, let's take a round figure. Let's say you're paying 7% for the money.
Okay.
Right? You're looking at over, and they'll stretch you out over as long as you need. But I would tell you, you're going to be paying not what you think for your education. You're going to be paying at least twice that
Okay.
by the time you pile your interest in.
So to pay that debt back, I've got $150,000 in student debt. I start off at $60,000 arbitrarily,
Right.
and over the course of the next 10 or 15 years, I'm going to pay about $300 and some thousand.
That's
Well, that is not only the price of a house; it's a price of a very good house.
Absolutely. And I believe nobody tells you that. That's the thing that bothers me more than anything. No one tells you that. And I want to back up, and I want to go back now and I'm going to go to talk about interest and what our perceptions are. In the university, they're probably going to tell you that you have to have at least 5 or 6 jobs during your career to advance yourself, you're told. Now, I would tell you that understand that all the time you're doing that, you're costing yourself more money because you're moving to different places. Every time you change a job, you increase your standard of living, or you usually do. And consequently, this is the hole that continues to be filled. So I started real simply with people that have coming out or have just come out of college, and I say, look, how many bosses do you want to have?
Okay, that's
Pretty
Ralph.
simple.
If Ralph and I were to answer that question, we'd probably say, except for our wives, one boss.
One boss.
Yeah.
Okay.
For you, a dean and a president was one too many. I understand, right, Ralph?
Yeah, the dean was fine. The president had
Shaky.
a couple of screws loose, I think.
we both know him, don't we? Okay. So that would be our answer, Duff. We
So,
want
all
to
right.
be relatively independent, right?
And I would tell you that probably 90% of the people that I talk to that are coming out of school would say the same thing.
Okay.
They would say one. So then we would sit down with a piece of paper and I'd start with them and I would say, okay, so what are you going to do when you get out of college? Well, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to get a job. And I think that's fine and that's a very good thing.
There's their one boss.
And that's what they think is that's one boss. However, I say to them, okay, where are you going to live?
I'm going to live in a house.
Yes, some of them tell me a house, some of them will tell me they rent. I say either of those are great, but I said, wait a minute, we're counting bosses. I said, what happens if you don't make the payment on the house? And what happens if you don't pay your rent? Well, they say, I guess I get thrown out. I say, well, that sounds awful lot like a boss to me. So I say, okay, so let's, on our piece of paper, let's call that two bosses. Okay,
I think I know where you're going with this, because, hey, I need transportation to get to work.
That's right.
Is that going to be another boss?
That's right. That's you can afford to buy a car. Your dad's going to buy you a car when you come out of school. Well, no, I probably need a car. I say, well, or I got an old car, and I probably would get a new car if I go to work. So that's reasonable.
Yeah.
How much are you going to pay for that?
Well, I want a nice car.
Right.
You've been in the car-looking business lately, Ralph. What's a decent car going for these days?
Well, a used car right now, anything that's, let's say, 5 years old, the minimum that you're going to pay is $15,000, and it can go up to 25 or 30 if you're looking at, let's say, a 5-year-old truck.
Okay, now let me understand this. I just got my PhD. I have $159,000 in debt. My starting salary, which I just Googled, is a little less than $60,000. I've got to get a place to live, and well, $15,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money because I'm making $60,000. Can we live on that?
Yeah, no, it's questionable.
Yeah.
The next thing is how are you? You told me you wanted one boss. We're already up to 3. All right. Now, what about? Are you going to pay your loan off at all on your student loan?
Boss number 4, I think you're.
Number 4.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, and car transportation we talked about. Do you want a $5,000 car? Do you want a $15,000 car? Do you have that cash? Normally
No.
they'll say to me, no. You know why? Geez, no, but I got $1,000 I can put on. I say, that's great. So what about that? That's another boss. Because if you don't make the car payment, they'll come pick up the car and
Yeah.
take it back.
We had it then as number 3, didn't we?
Yeah. And of course, part of it too is I think a lot of students tend to look at their rent and they say, well, let me see, I'm in off-campus housing right now and I'm paying $300 a month. And you say, okay, well, you're going to North Carolina and you're going to start at the university there and you're going to have your own apartment, and look at the price of apartments around that area and you discover that, gee, a 2-bedroom apartment, because you want to a bedroom that you can turn into a study and
Sure.
work in it, that's $1,000.
Or more, yeah, good
Or
point.
more.
Yeah, okay. So at this point, these college students that you're talking with, Duff, they must be getting a little bit green in the face or green around the gills.
They start twitching in their chair.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, you're the only guy I know that carries around in his pocket an amortization schedule.
Yeah.
Now, you were talking about that the other night. So, when you start to talk to these students, that's when you drag out the amortization schedule, right?
Right.
And what do you tell them about that?
Well, some of them say to me, "I'll buy a house," and I say, "That's great. You got 5% down. Maybe you can get a house for 5% down." And I say, "How much are you going to pay for the house?" Well, maybe $150,000, and that's certainly reasonable in today's market.
Oh, yeah.
And I say, okay, and I don't ever tell them what they ought to pay. And I say, well, how much do you think you're going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for that house? Well, probably a 30-year mortgage.
Okay.
Reasonable. And I say, how much do you think you really paid for that house?
Well, it's a $150,000
That's-
house,
That's right. So $150,000.
and I'm paying some interest. So,
Yeah.
oh, maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm paying I'm paying $25,000 in interest.
The way we do interest on homes, because it's all front end loaded almost, is you probably are going to at least pay $300,000 for that house.
What?
Might be a hair less, but and
At this point, our hypothetical student puts down his $5 coffee.
That's right. That's right.
What is going on here? So yeah,
And of course, Duffy, as you said, with everything front end loaded, the student has to realize that if he gets a 30-year mortgage, 15 years of that is not paying on his house.
that's correct. About 15 years before you really start to pay any principal off,
Yeah.
and then it begins to be more than that.
I remember the first house I bought, and I looked at my first statement from the bank that had done my mortgage, and I had paid, I think it was $450 a month for that house. And I looked at it and I said, okay, I paid $448, and I paid $2 on the principal.
hmm Well, you know something, Ralph? That is something they did not teach us in kindergarten
No,
or grade school or high school
you know,
or in college.
the interesting thing to me is that, you know, parents today, many of them are quite willing to talk to their children about sex and sexual activity and STDs and everything. You know, we can have that conversation. But money is still the big verboten topic. We don't talk to our children, I don't think, enough about
Yeah, about finances.
finances.
Good point. And for you and I, Ralph, our parents never talked to us about sex either. That was verboten. You know,
Yeah,
so-
well,
So now we.
1 out of 2 ain't bad.
Okay, now, what's the takeaway then for our hypothetical college student, Doc?
Well, I think it's pretty simple. We talk about the need for savings from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we talk about what are you going to spend your money on, and do you want to support the banker? Because that's what you, with a house, that's really what you do with a 30-year mortgage. Or do you want to spend your money? And it takes very early planning. And the first thing you really have to do is you have to knock that student debt out of the way. Because understand, bankruptcy or anything will not wipe that out. That is yours for life.
Yeah, so in other words, I say, well, I got a good job and then the company went broke And that meant that I couldn't make my car payment, I couldn't make my house payment, so I had to declare bankruptcy. So they took away my car payment, they took away my house payment, but they didn't take away my student loan payment. I still owe $159,000. And the government will be saying to me, gee, Ralph, when you get another job, you're on the hook for us, because that didn't get wiped out in your bankruptcy.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that.
No.
And the other thing I think that, and this may be a false hope, I think it is, but it may be something that a lot of people are kind of counting on, and that is sometimes the government talks about, okay, we're going to forgive all student loans.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when the government budgeting board looks at that and says, what's that going to cost the government of the United States? They're going to say, no, we can't do that.
I think you're right. I think it's like war. I don't think we ever went into a war that we didn't think we were going to win. And one thing we know after Vietnam and we know after Afghanistan is that, you know what, though they told us we were going to win, I don't think we won.
Well, and then we don't count the costs either going in. I just took a look at the fixed rate for student loans. It goes from about 5% to about 12%. So that's something else.
That's
You know,
huge.
when you are negotiating for a student loan, you better try and find the one that's at 5%.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing with loans at 12% for students is often people will come along and they'll say, well, you go to X lender, you will get your books and tuition and living costs, but you won't have any free money to say, well, this is my lifestyle while I'm in college.
Mm-hmm.
But we can loan you half again or double that amount for this year.
Correct. Yeah.
But we charge a little bit more.
A little bit more, and it's something that's going to be with you for a while too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So the little bit more that kind of slides across the desk very quietly turns out to be 7% more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they forget to tell you that there is interest charged and accrued during the time you don't make any payments.
Okay.
It's not your just your borrowed amount. There is interest in the interim.
Okay, so you get some money in your freshman year, you're not paying anything off,
Right.
but you're getting accrued interest. Is that
That's
what you're
right.
saying?
That's correct.
I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay. So you're going to talk to your student about savings.
Yep,
You're going to talk to your student about how many bosses they
they
are going to have to service, right?
Yep.
And so, what's this poor student gonna do? I mean, okay, I got some money coming in. I'll save $100 a month. Now what?
Well, first of all, they got to learn to make a budget,
Aha. Okay.
right? They know what their income is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Their net income, and not gross. Doesn't have anything to do with your professor that's 60,000 and truly he only takes home 40.
Uh-huh.
But he has to know what his net is, and from that, you need to make a budget that you can accomplish the things that you have. And you have to make a sheet out that says, I owe this, this is what the monthly payment's this, monthly payment's this, and then you know what you have to spend on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not starting with a salary. You're starting with a net spendable income. And understand that every time you chew at that, you probably are going to, with a car or with a house or with furniture, you probably are going to end up paying interest. So
Yeah.
you each time you take on another boss, and each time you have to pay that boss, and they get a portion of your money that you're putting into that.
Yeah. And you know what? Something that we haven't talked about is credit card debt, which is relatively invisible and relatively easy.
Until you
And-
quit making payments.
Yeah. And Ralph, did you ever have any credit card debt?
I did.
Duff, did you ever?
Sure.
Me
Oh,
three.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it's insidious in a way because if you can't, hey, let's say you can't afford the car payment this month, okay?
Yep.
Hey, cash advance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Now you're into the next pay.
Yeah. And I've had a lot of students that I've talked to in my office who have really struggled with credit card debt, and what I've seen is taking out one card to pay for the next
Another
card.
card. Yep.
To
Yeah.
pay-
Oh yeah.
yeah. Okay.
And the thing about that is often, it starts fairly innocuously because somebody says, well, I'm joining a fraternity or sorority at university because I want the contacts for when I get out and graduate. But there's a certain unstated, but their dress code. So yeah.
And if you've done some of the stuff that we've talked about in our psych takeaways, you probably have done a pretty good job of convincing yourself that this is really an investment in my future.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is actually, no, it's clothes that you're wearing to class and impressing people with.
Yeah, and a year and a half from now, they are going to be pretty worn out, and you're going to have to replace them.
Okay, yeah. So we've got our bosses, our multiple bosses. We have our job that probably isn't going to pay us enough money to satisfy all of our bosses. So what we have to begin to do is to do some long-range planning. That's the budgeting process, and some really hard decision making. That is, I will buy a $5,000 car instead of the $75,000 Suburban that I really want, right? So decision making.
Yeah,
I think that everyone will sometime in their lifetime have a mortgage.
yeah,
You have to have a place to live. So that I call that a necessity. Now you have to be careful what you pay and know that what you paid for the house to a realtor or to a bank or whoever is not what the final amount you have in that house. And I think you have to accept that. But I would tell you that somewhere along the line I learned, and I think everyone has to learn, I cannot spend more than I make and stay alive. At some point I'll run into the wall.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a good place for us to conclude today, Ralph.
Okay,
The
I have
wisdom of Mason. Okay, you've.
I have one more point that I want to make, and I want Mason to maybe comment on this.
Okay.
Years ago, it used to be kind of a standard that when you started work and you had grown up in whatever church, you know, because most people grew up
In churches.
in churches.
Okay.
And you started working, and the church came to you and said, we think you should begin to tithe
Okay.
now that you're independent. And you would say, yeah, okay, you know, what is the standard tithe? And they would say 10% of your net income. Well, today we have relatively fewer people who have come out of that as their youthful tradition.
I think that's correct, yeah.
So my take on it is what you do is you tithe to yourself. You sit down with your income
Okay. Yeah.
and you say, okay, I have disposable income of $400 a month out of my $60,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put $40 a month in an untouchable bank account.
Okay.
Okay? And I'm going to do that 10% as my net income goes up,
My
My-
tithe to myself goes
my
up.
tithe to myself goes up.
Mhm.
And I think after 20 years, many people would be amazed to find that, gee, you know, I have enough here now that I can afford to buy something without having to pay interest.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Or what's your take on that?
Yeah.
Well, I think you're right. That's all in the budgeting process, and I think you have to pay yourself. I think if you are a churchgoer, I think you need to pay your church, but all that stuff needs to go into a budget, and and you have to understand, it comes out of your net,
Yeah,
right? It comes out of what you have left after the government has taken what they want out of the front end. And if you're in a 401k, you're putting a certain amount in the front end for that. Or a retirement account, the same thing. So yes, I think budgeting is very, very, very important. And you have to be sure you get everything in it.
Okay.
yeah.
So, in conclusion, then, to our mythical college student, the takeaway is do not spend more than you make. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
And, you know, there is going to be a certain amount of emotional pain when you set your budget.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So, short-term pain, but long-term gain, something
Right.
we've talked about with positive psychology. Well,
Discipline. It's all about discipline.
okay, coach.
Yourself.
Yeah, Duff used to be a coach. Discipline is a big deal. So, until next time, this is Jim,
and Ralph,
and
Mason?
saying, hey, keep your stick on the ice
because we're all in this
together.
Interesting.